What does fear mean? F for false, E for evidence, A for appearing, R for real. False evidence appearing real. But the reality of fear is when it grips us, it truly grips us. There are so many forms of fear, but I can only relate to the things that have been so fearful in my life that they have just about paralyzed me. And one of them being divorce. When one goes through a divorce, there are so many different feelings, that contribute to the fear. It's the fear of being alone. It's the fear of being a failure. It's the fear of what do other people think of me. It's the fear of, am I going to cope? Will I survive? What are things going to be like? Would anyone ever look at me again? Will I ever get married again? And the list goes on and on and on. So how do we overcome fear? We don't actually overcome fear, in my opinion. You look for coping mechanisms to actually help you to get through the fear. Because fear is not something that you can walk around. It's something that you actually have to go through and to build the stamina within you to get to the other side. Now, this process isn't easy. And when we're actually going through something, it feels like it's never going to end. It feels like the weight is so heavy on our shoulders that it is dragging you down. But there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that totally depends on you. Are you going to embrace the fear? Are you going to feel the fear and just know that with faith, you can get to the other side? With trust and believing in a God and a higher power, you will get to the other side. And sometimes those experiences really just make you stronger. But the choice again is yours. Are you going to use it positively to grow you? Or are you going to let it stifle you and contribute to you just withering away? Now, I mentioned divorce. I then go to the fear of losing a loved one. Where I'm at in my life right now, there's the fear of losing my parents. Because old age, for most, is inevitable. Yes, one can't determine the age where life will be lost. But when you still have your parents, and I would like to believe I'm at a sort of middle age crossroads, and then my parents are older, obviously. And there's this fear that sits within me on what happens when I lose my parents. And sometimes the fear of losing loved ones almost paralyzes us and stops us from actually living. We drop boundaries, we drop all the good things because we're so fearful of losing. And that's not a good life either. So where does one find the balance? So how do we find balance in our lives? How do we get ourselves to the space where you're not overcomplicating life, you allowing the fear to be felt? It's there. Let's not be in denial. That's actually our truth. And if those fears are sitting within you, we have to embrace them. And acknowledgement is always the first step. We acknowledge that the fear is there. Then we have to look at how real is this fear? Is it false evidence or is there truth to it? And once we establish that, then you have a plan, to work around it. What are the insecurities that are creating the fear? And we can move to different levels of fear. If I look at being a mother, our children, Our children grow up. Our children go out. We don't sleep at night because our kids are out. We're worried about their safety. We're worried about who they mix with. And that creates a fear. For some parents, a paralyzing fear. Because if you look at the society and you look at the society we live in, there's so much going on out there that could have a negative impact on our children. So what is the foundation that we raise our children with? How do we impact positively on our children so that when they are out, they almost have the armor on, the armor of God around them, to ensure that they're safe. We can't keep them in glass houses. We can't hold on to them in little castles. They have a life. They need to have free spirits. Yes, we've birthed them, but they need to go out and engage with society, with communities, with the world. So what do we do as parents? We hold on to them at times instead of letting them go, instead of giving them a good foundation and allowing them to bump their heads. Yes, of course, they will. They'll be good and bad out there. But let's be the safety net. The safety net where they know they're loved, they know they're secure, and they just know they can come back to you because you are the parent that will engage with them, give them the tools to become the best versions of them. But how do our children become great versions of themselves if we as parents are broken? If we as parents are fearful? If they are making decisions from a biased perspective because it's all that they've seen? And I go back to, if one is divorced, children either see the strength of a dad or they see the strength of a mom. And this has impact on their lives. And this impact can be positive and it can be extremely negative. And a lot of it is based on fear. Now, in order to overcome fear, like I've mentioned, we need to go through the fear. We first have to acknowledge, what is the fear? Is it real or is it false? Where does it come from? What triggers it? What are these triggers that create this fear? And once we establish what the triggers are, because as I've mentioned, they're real. These are real fears that we're going through. We need to work on overcoming it. Do we actually overcome it? Not completely. We learn to manage it, and we learn to acknowledge it, and we learn to work through it. Fear can also come from lack of having, lack of providing. Now, this links to a career, or it could link to a schooling space, a varsity space, a studying space of any sort. Children fear not delivering. Children fear not meeting the expectation of parents. And the pressure that is put on our children because they feel that they have to get a certain grade or have to get a certain mark in order to make their parents happy. The peer pressure is intense because they benchmark themselves against other children. Now, there can be trauma that's also linked to some of the fear because there's bullying in a school. Sometimes children are not achieving due to bullying or due to traumatic experience of maybe violence in the home. One never knows, the list goes on as to what causes the trauma. Now, traumatic experiences create fear, undoubtedly. And that fear then ripples on. It has a ripple effect on everything else that we do. Because when you look at the triggers and you wind it back, when you really delve deep into what actually triggers the fear, you find that a lot of it is childhood experiences. So were you either being bullied as a child? Were you rejected as a child? Do you come from a space of lack as a child? And we need to really dig deep, and often people are not prepared to even go that deep, to even start the conversation. But if we are fearful, and if we find ourselves being either underachievers, or we find ourselves almost being OCD, obsessive compulsive disorders that step in, that often comes from fearful spaces, traumatic spaces, and courageous conversations need to be had. Conscious coaching, once again, helps get to where we want to be, because we are afraid, we are fearful of having those conversations. We are fearful of digging that deep. We are fearful of the outcome. But we have to step into it, acknowledge it, and look at different ways of overcoming it. So we've spoken on a number of things. We've spoken on fear. We've spoken on being fearful, maybe due to divorce, maybe due to losing a loved one, maybe due to childhood traumas, and everything has a trigger. And if anything I have shared today has triggered you, then you need to be talking to me. You need to be connecting with us. And if there's anybody that you know that may also be triggered by anything that I've shared, then please could you share this video and connect with us directly via Instagram, via Facebook, or via our YouTube channel. We look forward to holding your hand to walk through the fear and to become the best version of who you can be. Stay well and stay blessed.